We have been discussing for more than an hour, almost 2 hours, on the key elements to advance on wastewater and environmental surveillance. And now it is the time for the facilitators who did a very, very good job to report back to the plenary. So I will give the floor to the first facilitators for the methodologies and data interpretation breakout session. And Muklit is going to be you? Okay. So Muklit Yusuf, maybe you can go there because you have more space for the computer. Thank you very much, Muklit.
Thanks, Anna. My name is Mukhlid Yusuf from the NICD South Africa, together with my colleagues who were facilitating the session, Cindy, Anastasia, and Sophonius, and Steen. We had a group of about 15 people, 9 joined on site, and 11 were joined, 20 then, 11 were joined online. So the discussion that we had about the methodology and data interpretation, to talk specifically from starting from site selection, talking about sampling procedures, talking about then going to the lab concentration and extractions, PCR or direct detection or isolations, until you report or you generate your data, and how do you report it and how do you disseminate the data. So the structure that we used, we started with some slide question to warm up the discussion from the participants in the room. And we had a very, I would say, different responses in our questions, talking about what pathogens you're actually testing in your setting, in your countries. We also asked questions about what kind of surveillance you're doing, whether it's community-based or whether it's aviation-based, whether it's both. And the nice thing, the representation that we had was kind of vary between different countries. Two things that I need to mention: that the representation, I would say the representation from countries that have non-sewage sites were not included. In our slide questions, we did not find anyone who's coming from countries where they do non-sewage selection, non-sewage surveillance. And the other thing, there was about more than 50% in the room who were doing composite samples, which indication of ability to be able to do, to acquire auto samplers and being able to do composite sampling. So what we discussed here also, that there's supposed to be some kind of like tools or solutions to generate cost-effective methodology for composite sampling, for specifically for low-income countries. So, and that was the first slide. Then for the general discussion, we divided them to 3 components. The first one was the sampling methods. The second one was the laboratory protocols. And the third one was about data interpretation and data visualization. So in general, for the site selection, mostly the discussion was guided by how do we, when you select sites, how do you have a representative sites in your country or in your region, and logistics, which means how do you transport the samples that you collect from site A to site B, and what is the population density that you have in the areas that you are surveying. And just to say, currently also there's a big need for developing of tools that's able to identify or to measure the population density. It's not something that easily been acquired in all countries. In terms of sample concentration and extraction methods, most people reported back that they use based on the literature that is available currently, whether it's filter-based, whether it's beads-based, whether it's the method that the poly program used and that has been used for a long time. Also, it relies on the cost and the past experience that the people in the lab have to use those methodologies. In terms of, there was a question about what about the emergent detection methods that that people are currently have. And it appears that the use of the digital PCR has become a little bit more widely used. And of course, we know that the digital PCR, comparing to the conventional or the real-time PCR use, not just all because of sensitivity versus specificity, but also because of the scalability of using digital PCR is much easier compared to digital qPCR. But again, cost will be a major contributing factor for your decision as well. And the sequencing, the pathogen capture sequencing, it's also something that has been mentioned many times, which an indication also the use of metagenomics versus enrichment probe assays is also something that we need to discuss more, and we have more research into that. Um, One of the things that people have agreed widely is the use of validation, that it must be, and with the different variant quality assurance approaches, the use of the normalization assays is also important, like the fecal indicators, ppmv or crossphage, and also how do you compare this to other surveillance data. Harmonization of waste is also something important that needs to be done, and also across the lab into laboratory comparisons, and also to make sure that we have a standardization. And we talked about briefly about the EQ introduction of EQA system, and we said maybe could be a GLOWACON exercise, like when GLOWACON has different projects, aviation and gas mass gathering. Why can't GLOWACON take into one of the agenda is to develop an EQA system for laboratories that are part of the network. Then the normalization was also have been applied and has been discussed both in terms of pathogen detection and AMR, and using again the fecal markers. Dashboard and data sharing, something also have been used, and in some countries yes, in some countries not yet. And the last thing that everybody in the room agreed the importance of, or highlighted the importance of the need for harmonization of protocols, and how can we talk about the data sharing, which we all agree that it's big issue that need to be discussed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Muklit, and thank you to all the participants. Point taken, and all the ideas for GLOWACON. We have to work on this. Very good. Let's move to the reporting from the second breakout session on innovations in wastewater surveillance technologies and public-private partnerships. I'm not sure, Cesar, is going to be you? Okay, perfect. So you can go to the lectern. Thank you very much.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. The session was moderated by myself, by Ismani, and Sam. Sam had to leave us. He's flying back and right now. But anyways, it was a fruitful discussion, I think. We had maybe 12 people in the room and maybe 8 people online. And the way I organized the report here is in 3 themes of the discussions that we had. So the first theme was innovation in terms of aspects that need innovation. Also, the other one, the other theme was private public sectors and how to define private sector and how can they contribute to innovation. And the third theme was One Health, so how WES can help on the One Health approach. So a few bullet points that I wrote down. So for the first session, innovation session was what aspects of WES require innovation. So types of sequencing and metagenomic platforms and tools, which ones are more applicable, how to best interpret data from metagenomics, how to best respond based on the data generated, use of metagenomics when the target is not yet defined. So we start with genomics first. Best sampling, tools, equipment, storage, transport, worries about the temperatures, high temperatures, desert, and so on. Build remote IoT, Internet of Things, or automated samplers, automated the whole thing. So it can generate and send data remotely to the cloud, and the data can be accessed. Remote air pollution, air and water pollution sensors, innovation in modeling, integration of data science, digital epidemiology, identifying what metadata to be integrated, portable devices for field work, and markers and how to use the markers in WES. So that was the first theme. The second theme is the private public sectors. So First, we tried to define what people thought of what the private sector is. So what came out was utilities, service providers for like sequencing, for example, uh, large venture planners, public sectors, what authorities, regulators, university, infrastructure holders, clinicians, for example, communities, public safety. And there was need to identify areas of overlap between public and private sectors. How to motivate the private sector to come to WES or to get something beneficial to them from WES, and potentially generating more information from the data, for example, predictive modeling to generate data from, for example, pharmaceutical companies, vaccine companies, innovative financing. Um, some people mentioned that WES should go beyond pathogens into chemical security, drug use, drug abuse. This current lack of innovation on the modeling for sustainability of WES systems. And some people also mentioned the importance of developing public partnerships. On the final theme, the One Health theme, we discussed about current opportunity. There's currently a very good opportunity to build a case on the H5N1 to bring, to go to make a difference in the One Health area. We discussed how to convince farmers to invest in WES to get early warning, how to use WES to increase productivity, for example, in herd health. WES could help trustability and traceability in livestock industry, including export and import of meats, for example. Livestock supply chain could be players as well. Look at plant pathogens, not only animal pathogens in WES. Focus on WES in abattoirs, maybe develop a national regulatory system to require WES in abattoirs. Surveillance of animal feed. And finally, people displacement. Could WES help on addressing that as well? That's it.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much to all the participants. I think that you reported very well. I was a little bit wondering because I was in this session and I was wondering how you would do it because we touch upon all the possible topics. And actually, it was very good, just giving you my opinion. But I think that it went very good because we started from the basics. Like, let's define what a private partner is. And I really enjoyed this discussion. So we will have everything recorded and reported, and happy to continue discussing on this. And the next person to report is Bern. I see that you're just going to the lectern. You know that place very well. And Bern is going to report on the building and sustaining wastewater surveillance systems. That was the third breakout room.
Thank you. Well, similar setup, and we designed this this session in a little bit in an unusual way. So I had a lot of opportunity to prepare this in the previous days. It is not unlike the session which was just presented, but we confronted a little bit our group, which had a similar size, with 3 scenarios. We started actually from the title of the session, which when you read it carefully, you see the 2 words are missing. We're talking about creating and sustaining a wastewater surveillance system. And then for a twist of fate, or I don't know what, it was not written for public health. Okay, so we took this as an opportunity and said, okay, so let's make it so for whatever application. And we confronted the audience to 3 scenarios. One scenario was basically an autonomous region where you're facing some challenges and you would like to agree that wastewater surveillance is scientifically accepted and useful. You would like to deploy it. You are Minister of Health there, but you don't have funds. You're facing an aging society. At the same time, you are depending on tourism, so you have vulnerabilities. Climate change is an issue, but you're also in an emerging economy. Another scenario was you're an international player in water utility. You would like to diversify your portfolio, which so far deals on wastewater treatment and eventually also on maintenance of infrastructure. And now in the context of circular economy, you would like to introduce aspects of water reuse, risk management framework, and actually you would like to explore if the information encoded in wastewater has an economic value. And last but not least, you are a real estate developer close to an international airport of a big city, and you would like to make sure that your asset investment is safe so that you're not running into problems. And also there in these solutions, the idea was we are using wastewater surveillance as an information source. And of course, that was a shock to many of the people because we started really to talk here business. And if you are a researcher or if you're at a public health institute, you saw from the reaction, people felt uncomfortable. Immediate reaction was, well, if I engage with the private sector and accompany my contract of employment in the public health service would not allow for that because I have a conflict of interest, right? And so we have to manage it. But then we started to loosen up and talk about the roles and the opportunities and actually started to talk about ideas in which it emerged that wastewater surveillance per se is a tool situated at a place in our society where many different policy areas come together. It's not only public health, it's not even only health. There are many other aspects. It's environmental protection. There are other players who could potentially be interested in information, and we started to speculate about that. We also came to the understanding that interdisciplinarity is something very important, and networking, if you would like to maintain a wastewater surveillance system, and that you have indeed to talk about getting your solution to a market readiness phase. So not anymore focus on the next fancy tool to make even a better detection of a pathogen, but at a certain moment, the question was, is the good an enemy of the perfect? And is good not good enough in order to serve the purpose? We also come to the point that we said, look, it is important to talk about funding, but wastewater surveillance data don't only have a monetary value. They have also societal and political value. It can be in currency and science diplomacy. By working together, actually, we start to talk about topics which maybe otherwise we would not feel comfortable to talk about. And that delivered actually a quite interesting discussion in which we identified a number of needs which GLOWACON should address and where GLOWACON could be helpful in order to build the necessary capacities. We actually started to say that capacity development maybe is not only the development of technical capacities and capabilities, but maybe there are other skills which we need to leverage or promote. The first one clearly is we need not only to talk about public-private partnerships, as we have heard already several times, but then we need also to reflect a little bit about rules. Because a public-private partnership cannot lead to a situation that you give a monopoly. That is the no-go for any public organization. So how can we make sure that we have fairness in this business? And then came some very interesting that actually what we need really is also some training for customer discovery and market scoping. If we are talking about novel forms of financing, and Kirk yesterday presented some of these options, we need actually to really not only talk about customers we believe might be customers, but when you say, for instance, a farmer is a customer and I suppose he would pay, and maybe you have to go to the farmer and ask him, would you be ready to pay? Because we speculate, because we are convinced about the tool, but maybe if we confront the tool to what we think is a customer, and which is a very heterogeneous customer base, that's not the case. So what we definitely need to do is also to join forces to address different unsolvable issues. So because of the unique position of wastewater surveillance where different policy areas come together, We have to team up with this. I think Bilge had a very nice graph this morning about the three ministries where she's exactly situated about it. And in this, another issue came up, which is the role and understanding of digitalization. Actually, one of our team members said, sometimes I have the impression that what we wastewater surveillance is producing are dashboards. And that's not true, right? Maybe you need a dashboard for communication purposes, but maybe you need it for somebody else. And when we are talking about health, there are other health actors which are not in the room. Practitioners or insurance companies dealing with risk related to life and so forth. And when we are talking about preparedness, that might actually also include disease prevention. And diseases are not only infectious diseases. So you heard also in the previous one, we were talking about drugs of abuse. There are other health parameters that can be measured, which are causing a lot of damage. And where we have early information available. I think some of the talks we saw this morning were talking about the mismatch between vaccine distribution and vaccinated people. So do we actually really know that vaccines are used? Do we know, for instance, and this is an example that was given in our group, if we deploy medication for AIDS treatment, that it's really used? Because we base our assumption on statistics of delivery, but not necessarily on consumption. So here we have a back channel which could actually control if our statistics would be nice. So basically that's it. We would be happy to go on a little bit. We will make a little report and feed this into the GLOWACON community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bern, and thank you for the participants. I think that this was one of the topics that everybody wanted to discuss about yesterday, so very happy that you touched upon, even if it was not only on public health, but it is good also to zoom out a little bit on this. And let's go for the last breakout session on the WHO guidance package and decision support tool. So Joanna, please.
Thank you. And apologies in advance because I didn't actually catch that we needed to report back. So I've made some notes, but please, anyone who was in the room with me, feel free to chime in if that's okay, Anna, because I feel feeling the burden of responsibility here. But we had 16 people, 9 online and 7 in person. And what we really wanted to do was to familiarize participants with the prioritization framework and really try and explore how it can support public health focused pathogen prioritization for multi-pathogen WES within the LAC region. So I provided a brief overview of the tool, but really what we wanted to do was also bring home that the centerpiece should be the use cases, right? And putting that front and center of your decisions. And so we had a contribution from Judith Wong, really providing examples from how WES data has really been supported specific use cases for WES data within Singapore, and also from Dr. Ibrahim in Africa, in the African region, provided some examples as well, which are really useful, I think, for focusing us on that. And in particular, in Singapore, one example of use of Zika virus data, so the integrated case, mosquito and wastewater surveillance data, which enabled really quite localized understanding of disease circulation in the city and led to very targeted public health communication about possible Zika transmission in a specific area of the city, which I think really inspired people in the room. So some key takeaways. I think one thing that struck me, which I think is useful to report back, was this question that in a context where an integrated surveillance system is operating well and disease is being kept at bay, does it make it a little bit harder then for you to make the value proposition or the case for investment to your government or to others? And I suppose there's no answer there, but just an interesting point where we really were seeing this example from Singapore of very successful surveillance systems and integrated surveillance systems keeping disease at bay, and just thinking about how then you can communicate that up to really make the case for the value of that system. There is also another point made, and please, Andrew, excuse me if I'm paraphrasing incorrectly here, but about maybe you don't need to prioritize. If you can, use metagenomics, then you'd be able to look at the whole genome, and you wouldn't need to carry out this laborious and really quite difficult process of prioritizing which pathogens you want to look at. But of course, that's a very expensive thing to do. And so I think I'd still make the case for the importance of this process. And one of the things that came out in doing it, just in a very small group of people, was that so many different pathogens were coming up on our screen. We used Slido, and you could see the word cloud, which pathogens were being described by people as being of priority, of public health significance in their country. So setting aside WES for a minute, which pathogens would you think would be important to tackle in your context? And it really brought home just how important it is to have these context-specific conversations and to have tools that enable that conversation to occur in a structured and localized way. Another point that came out just to flag was that probably unsurprisingly, and there's been several presentations on this already, was AMR as a priority to be looking at in wastewater. And perhaps for lack of time, at the end of the session, we were a bit less clear on what specific public health actions you would take if you did detect AMR. I think it's a more complex situation than perhaps many of the other diseases that have been discussed, and certainly measles that came up as the second contestant there, around what makes sense, and perhaps some public health interventions that should already be taking place. So it's a bit less easy to think about what action would be spurred by identifying it. And the last point, just to say, and thank you, Christine, for mentioning this, that obviously this is a pilot version of the package. We're delighted to be talking to as many people as possible about it. I have shared before that there is a feedback form, and I can reshare that. But really to say that a priority for WHO and for this network should be to really seek to evaluate uptake of that package very carefully to understand the extent to which it is supporting those conversations at the local and national level, and how we can improve it in the next iteration as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Joanna.
Any comments, additions, please?
So of course, I think that anybody can comment, but you did a very good job, even if you didn't prepare. Anybody wants to comment from this group to add to what Joanna just mentioned? Okay, if not, I think that is a very good transition because you were reflecting upon the different priorities in different countries. And actually, our session 5 is about developing a roadmap for the Americas. So I think that this is going to be super useful for the next discussions. The first discussions were more like theoretical or more like just sharing experiences. Now we really want to move forward and see how these discussions and GLOWACON can support this specific region to develop an action plan. So we will have until 4:15 for the discussions. You see there the 4 different breakout rooms. As before, you will find your name in the panels just before the breakout rooms. You have to go to the 6th floor, and then you will have a coffee break. And I hope that the people that will be reporting will have enough time in this half an hour coffee break to prepare a good report. We are here to support you in any case. Thank you very much, and see you back at 4:45.